You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, go ahead and introduce today's guest, please.
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm happy to introduce you to Dr. Melanie Barham. We're going to talk about hosting a virtual event on a global scale. So some fun facts. Melanie is an animal health network coordinator at Animal Health Laboratory at the University of Guelph. She's an MBA candidate in Sustainable Commerce from the University of Guelph, DVM with a specialty in equine medicine from Ontario Veterinary College at the University of Guelph, and she's a founder of DVM Project. On the personal side of things, she has hobbies: camping, cross-country skiing, cycling, and hiking with her dog. Has a beekeeping yard with her husband and recently harvested 700 pounds of honey. Wow, from 8 hives. That's a lot of honey. My father-in-law is doing that, and they collected, I think, 400 and something from 17. I'm going to tell him that you have better hives here than he in Russia. Thank you for joining us, Melanie. Pleasure to have you here. Thank you for finding the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be on the show.
So, Melanie, my first question to you: do you compete with Craig Mosley? Because he also has bees, and I know that he's also has a property, I think, somewhere on that area. And is there any competition there within the University of Guelph?
Well, I got to know Craig through the Global Vet Career Summit, which we're going to talk about. But yeah, I recently learned that he has bees. But no, we don't have a competition. We should though, and I understand there's a number of other veterinarians who have bee yards, like Scott Weiss, who's an infectious disease expert. He has bees as well, so we chat bees sometimes.
Okay, well, maybe there's a competition at the B level, and you guys are then not competing between yourselves. So, Shawn?
Yeah, so Melanie, it's so good to be here. We were part of the Global Veterinary Career Summit, Talkatu, and it was a really interesting event. It's been a while since we connected. How did the event go, and what was it like hosting the event on such a global scale?
Yeah, it was really interesting, particularly during the pandemic. For those who don't know, the Global Vet Career Summit was in June. It was a large scale career summit that we tried to make as global as possible, featuring companies from 3 different continents, so Australia, the UK, and Canada, and the US. And it brought together 1,100 veterinarians and veterinary professionals, as well as over 200 speakers and about 30 sponsors. We had such a great time. It went really well, actually, I think, from our perspective. Although it was a little bit, as anybody who's organized an event behind the scenes, it can be a little bit crazy. It's busy, and particularly during the pandemic. For me personally, I was coming off of maternity leave during that time to go back to my job at the University of Guelph, and then I had some MBA courses in the middle, so it was a little bit crazy, a little hairy at times, but it was really fun. And I think the biggest thing that I thought was really interesting about it was the connection that people made despite being so far apart. And, we thought, how is it going to go as a virtual event as opposed to an in-person type thing? But it was really cool to see people connecting and making and offering help to people across the globe in the networking sessions and in the communication part.
So that's what was puzzling me all this COVID time. When we attend the conferences, we bump into people. I'm more focused on the exhibit hall recently. And one question: how do professionals that attend this, as they sort of as attendees, and what is that forum in the virtual environment where they kind of bump into each other and meet for the first time? How does that happen? And then the second one: if you're a vendor and you're presenting some sort of company, how would people bump into you in advance? Because this whole experience of walking down the hallway, seeing different products, stopping by, doing their little stupid, competitions and stuff that they come up with. So how do you engage? How do you invite people to talk to you? And so those 2 categories: one, vendor; two, attendees presenting their new product; and another one is, vet to vet sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think it can't be business as usual. So you can't just, I think very, very early in the pandemic, we saw a couple of events that maybe people had taken an in-person thing as really rushed and popped it into a virtual event. So they kind of switched over. But I think it has to be purpose built a little bit. And I'm not talking in the vet space. I think everywhere people were starting to try to do that. And then I don't know if you guys remember, like in the first few weeks of the pandemic, everyone was putting on like free training. We're going to do this and this, and like all of these. Oh, here's how to entertain your kids. Here's how to do these things. And then everybody got very, very tired of it because it was really just in-person training put online. So I think you have to design it purposefully. So ours, for example, we designed it. This is maybe where there's a couple of dichotomies. So one is that you can design it so that people put their lives on hold like you would for a traditional conference and go. And they would block off the time in their schedule, which we're maybe seeing companies allow for now. But early in the pandemic, when we planned our event, we planned it because we knew that people weren't going to be able to take time off work to do it because it was busy season in clinics and it was just like, and just life in general was hectic. So we planned ours, we purpose built ours so that it was being able to be integrated into your life. So a lot of our presentations were not slide based, they were just talking based with videos. So from that perspective, that was the presentation part. And that's what I think event organizers need to look at. From a perspective of a vet to vet or a professional to professional, how do you get people to interact? I think choosing a platform that can allow you to engage and plan meetups and plan and have discussions is really helpful, as well as being able to message people. And sometimes that breaks down barriers where maybe they wouldn't come up to you at the end of a talk because there's 10 other people there to talk to the speaker, but maybe they would message you afterwards, where traditionally we wouldn't have had that at an in-person conference. And then from a business perspective, from a delegate to business perspective, I think it's important to, we learned a lot doing this in our first go round with this, and there's lots of things we're going to change from that perspective with the exhibitor area. So ways to engage the delegates in ways that are authentic and feel real, as opposed to trying to push them over there or trying to get them, people will naturally avoid going into the exhibitor area because it may seem weird or there's not a talk per se. So having things like meetups or events that they can go to, or including the sponsors in your talks or including them as moderators or different things, that can be really, really helpful. And we found big success in areas where we invited the sponsors to be speakers. That allowed people to get to know those vendors a little bit better.
So, Melanie, I was involved in your conference. I spoke at one of the sessions, and I felt that it was really impactful how you guys kind of made it not your traditional pitch for a product. It was more get to know the people behind the company. And I think that that's great because it does allow you to get your brand out, and it also allows you to interact with the audience in a different way than you would normally at a trade show. And so I felt that that was really interesting. Ivan, you'll be curious to know that I did a speech on our core values behind the company, which you contributed to. So that was kind of cool. And I thought that it was a really interesting kind of way to interact with people. My question is, what are the biggest things that you learned? What were the things that you feel didn't go so well? And what were the things that you felt went really, really well? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So things that went really well. One, we got lots of people engaged and people coming, and that was cool. And we had our speakers were really, really interested and shared a lot of information and put up tons of opportunities for people to interact with the people who are listening. So they put in lots of extra documents and extra meetups and things like that. So that was really neat. And I also really loved, as I said to Ivan earlier, I love that we had over 14,000 messages that had gone back and forth between participants within a couple of days. And even before the conference actually started, we opened the doors for people to get sorted out and get logged in. And there were already like 4,000 or 5,000 messages by the time the conference opened. So that was really amazing. So the idea that it's just a Zoom meeting and you log in, I think that's got to be over for conferences. Now, what didn't go so well and what I would do differently as an organizer, you always think of those things first, and you think of those as the biggest things. But I think I would change how we had people interact with our sponsors. I would change how our exhibit hall was available to people, and I would make it more part of the conversation. And we've already started designing some innovative ways that we can involve sponsors next year that can feel a bit more natural and feel a bit more. Nobody likes to be sold to per se, but getting to know about the companies. So I think more and more what I see from people and what we know from market research is that people aren't buying something, or they're not getting involved with a company because of the actual product. Sometimes they're getting involved because of the values behind the product and the people behind and the relationships that they build. So how can we create opportunities that are better and more authentic for delegates to really get to know what companies would align with their values? So that's what we're looking at designing a little bit more. The other thing that I think we might do, we had over 166 sessions across 5 different time zones, which was really hectic and really intense. And we might narrow that down because a lot of people said they felt very overwhelmed with the amount of content. So we're also, again, thinking of different ways for people to stream or people to really get the most and not feel overwhelmed during the experience. Although there's so much content to grow your career. You want to make sure that the experience and that the way that they interact is something where they feel it's achievable and that they can take in a bite-sized way. Our content also is available for 12 months, which is really cool. And we still have some tickets for sale as rewatches because every single piece of content is available, which I think is a really strong part of the conference. And particularly because there's 166 sessions, there's no way you could take it all in unless you stayed up all night, particularly across all the different time zones. So having it available at all different times is really neat.
That's totally awesome. So my question is around platform. So, it's something that I find is very interesting, and other people that are listening to our show, I'm sure that they've thought about holding a virtual event. And I think the technology behind these virtual events is really a key piece of it. And that I was researching putting on a virtual event. We backed away from it because after speaking with you and lots of other people, I know how much friggin' work it is. So we didn't do that. But did you guys choose the right platform? Will you use the same platform again? And what platform did you use?
So we used Whova, WHOVA, which is kind of a funny way to pronounce it. It's a funny word. I liked it from a lot of perspectives. Certainly from the delegate perspective, it was nice. And it was nice that it was app-based, so you could listen to it and watch it on your phone. And then you could stream it to your TV or you could have it available on your desktop. We looked at about 10 other ones that were used in lots of different business fields as opposed to veterinary specific, mostly because a lot of times I think we get a bit myopic about, oh, it has to be veterinary based to be a good platform. We as veterinarians like to think we're really special, just like I'm sure dentists feel the same way or
Yep.
lawyers or whatever, but we like to think it has to be purpose built for veterinarians. So we looked at about 10 different ones. This one seemed to be the best leader at the time, and they were really responsive companies. So I think at the time it probably was the leader. I think from the perspective of going through from the exhibitor experience, I would maybe either, if Whova, I think they're making advances in the way that they're interacting. I'd either go with a different one if Whova doesn't change their exhibitor area, or if they do, it makes some advances in how people interact with exhibitors, I would stick with them. And also the other part would be something that what we learned that a lot of people like to watch via desktop still, because they like bigger screens, although there was a good proportion of people who love to watch on the go and while they were out doing things. Really honestly, this area is going to be changing and evolving. So next year, for example, how we take in CE might be totally different than at the beginning of the pandemic when, like, for example, myself, I was at home with 2 kids with no childcare. So no parents to help, nothing, just my husband and I managing. So for me, like, I had to take it in on the go. So, and a lot of our participants were the same. And for our topic too, so for careers, we know that not a lot of employers are going to say, yeah, here's CE money to go to a conference that's to advance and change your career, potentially. So they might think, oh, maybe I'm giving you the tools to leave veterinary medicine, or maybe I'm giving you the tools to leave your job here, which honestly couldn't be further from the truth. But we knew that a lot of people would have to be taking it out of their own budget. So we had to choose a platform that was right for our budget and then right for our participants at that exact time and how people were taking it in. So understanding your audience and what the age is like, I think that's really important. A year ago, this might have been completely different. Like the way that people took in a virtual conference might have been totally different than it will be in a year from now.
That's really cool. Question about the content. So you mentioned that the content is available after and you're still selling the tickets. So you can still invite people to view the content and you can still monetize it as the platform continuously after the event.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, that's really cool. So then the following question is what you touched on is CE, because usually CE is for, you go to the conference, you got the budget from, whoever, yourself or your employer, and then you engage with it, you do or you do not. And then this seems like you can browse the content after and then get familiar with it. Can you still get the credits for your CE? Are we well advanced in that now? Is there like you can control that? Because some states and provinces are a little more sticky about it than others.
Yep.
So you just kind of consume the content and they just include it into, I think that before there was a separation, consuming it online or not in some. I think in Ontario it is. You can do like online courses, but then there's some that you have to do in person. I don't remember in particulars, but can you just comment on CE and like all this recorded stuff?
Yeah, so we went for race approval, and race is also evolving and changing. So that's the gold standard in the US for approval. So we went for 17 hours of race approval, which is great. Although we had over 50 hours of content because we were on a short timeline, we went for 17 of the hours. So we can give certificates after the fact. That is a slight administrative cost afterwards. So that has to be factored in. But yeah, anybody can get their hours afterwards. And I think that's actually one of the powerful things is when you're looking at going to conferences this year, is the material going to be available? And when you're attending, are you going to be able to block off the time in your schedule? So if you're an attendee, that's kind of important to know because I know if if you get busy in real life, then you may not get to attend as many as you may not get as many CE hours as you might have desired. The other part I think is nice is that if it's available afterwards, you can share it with your team. You know how when you go to a conference, you have a ton of information and you're all jazzed up and you're like, yeah, we're going to do all of these amazing things. And then you go back to your team, they've not heard the information. So making change is really, really hard. And for career stuff in particular, you may need to go back and hear it several times before it's really going to land for you and be able to make real change. Because as you know, like life happens and moving forward can be challenging, and setting goals and changing things about yourself or about the way that you do things can be a real challenge. So being able to revisit this amazing talk that you saw or being able to go back and say key points, that's really important. And it also means that you don't have to take as many notes because I can't tell you how many conferences I've gone to where I have a notebook that it doesn't make any sense to me a year later. And I have no idea I have no idea what I was actually meant to be implementing. I just remember, oh, that was a really good talk.
I've got a couple questions for both of you. I think our listeners may find this really interesting. And so I'll start off with a little bit of my own experience. So I've been to 5 or 6 different virtual, call it summits or trade shows since the whole pandemic started, some in the vet space, some in the business space. And what I found to be the best platform is this platform called Pathable. I found it really interactive, really enjoyable. An observation that I had my own is not blocking off my schedule and trying to do work while I was attending a virtual show was a complete hot mess. And I think if I was going to a summit or a trade show again, virtual or not, block off the time in my calendar and be present for that event. So interested to hear from both of your perspectives. Have you attended other virtual events? And did you block off the time in your calendar? And what was your experience like? And what were the top experience? My top two so far were the Vet Partners one that was on Pathable, and also the EOS Worldwide, which is related to traction, which was on Pathable. Both incredible, very interactive, and I had similar experiences to attending an in-person trade show where I connected with people totally at random, then went off and had a conversation, and then something wonderful happened. So those are my positive experiences, and I've had a bunch of what I would categorize as absolute train wrecks. Melanie, the Global Career Summit was not a train wreck. It was great,
Okay,
but
phew.
it wasn't as good as those other two. So yeah, just interested to hear from you guys.
Yeah, Ivan, do you want to go first?
Sure. I signed up for another one and didn't show up. And then I spoke at one, and I did have to block off the time for that because I did speak at that one. So I would say I'm probably the laggard when it comes to adopting to the virtual conference. I just don't have that commitment because my schedule is I start at 5 a.m. and then it's throughout usually at least 5 p.m. So there's 12 hours of back-to-back meetings. So if I don't block it, it's not going to happen. So all the stuff that I used to do at the conference, I'm just not there. So I think that to me, it's a challenge. It's not because of the platform. I think it's not you, it's me. But I think that the adoption curve for me is different. Blocking the time off, I think, would be valuable. Again, I have a different purpose of going to conferences these days. For the last, 8+ years, I was a vendor. So for me, a good conference was where there's good product placement for me, good audience that will be at the lectures and walk through the hallway. So I think that to me, to be honest, it's a challenge of being a vendor at these. And I know that a lot of vendors are listening to our show. So this would be interesting to see how we can better engage, because honestly, those are the ones that are sponsoring these. And that was a big opportunity to represent your product and get people invited. So I'm looking forward to getting new, Melanie, innovative ideas around that. And I appreciate that you're thinking about that, because putting the content with people that are willing to listen to the topics to get CE, I get that. For vendors, I'm not sure if we're there yet, where at least I would be so excited about it. So those are Those are my sort of two experiences.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I attended this. They were totally out of the vet space. One was from the PMI Project Management Institute because I'm also a project manager, and it was an interesting conference. Project Management Institute has changed over their leadership, and it's become a lot more fresh and new. So this platform, you entered, and it looked like you were entering into a conference. Like it looked like you were entering into the doors of a conference.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was kind of neat. Like it was like a VR kind of thing, and then you could walk into different areas. So it was really like you were there, and they showed all the different doors for things that were open at the time. So the exhibitor area, they really pushed people towards it through doing like they had giveaways and stuff like everybody always does, but then they had other kind of things that were inside that you could only unlock if you went into the visitors area or into the exhibitor area, which was kind of cool.
So they gamified it a little.
A little bit, yeah. And then the other part would be I was interested to see, I didn't see this in this platform, but it'd be cool if you had to walk through the exhibitors area to get to your talks. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like almost like, how casinos do that with slot machines.
Right, right. Yeah.
And then the other one was a live event that I went to. It was about, it's called Tribe. It was about developing membership sites and figuring out membership retention and stuff like that. It was very cool, but it was live and it was really exhausting. Like it was really good content, but I had to block off the time because they didn't give you a schedule. You just had to show up and trust that it was going to be good. They didn't even tell you what guests were going to be next. It was like a total surprise. So the element of you didn't even want to get up and go to the bathroom. We were just like, okay, well, I got to stay because I don't know what's going to be next. So that was interesting, but I don't know if that would work. It worked for me because my children were actually, my parents took them for the weekend, which was great. But otherwise, I think that would have been a kind of a disaster. So it was a challenge. Like it definitely required a lot of commitment. So I think that would have to be a topic where you really have to go all in on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those were two that I thought were interesting.
Any beekeeping conferences online that you've attended?
I haven't attended one, but there is the International Honeybee Consortium that's coming up that's being run by
Ooh.
some veterinarians. Yeah.
It's so
That's
funny.
awesome.
It's such an area of innovation because each and every conference that I went to has had some elements that are amazing and some elements that are not so amazing. So this is such an evolving and like constantly changing space, and it appears that it's going to be around for some time to stay. So this was a really fun conversation, Melanie. I'm so glad that we got you to come on the show. We always like to wrap up in the same way. So the first question we have is, what's something that's inspired you lately? Whether it's a TED Talk, YouTube video, a book that you've read, or just a person that you've bumped into that you'd recommend for our listeners.
Yeah, so I read a book recently called Disruptors. It's about women who kind of broke the mold. So it's just a case study. It was this woman had done her PhD on female leaders and in business, and so she did qualitative interviews with them, and it was really cool. Like she shared the best stories and and kind of put them into unique chapters so that you could take away some good stuff. It was easy to read, and chapters were short, which I feel is important at this time of year.
Awesome. And then, do you know a person who we should invite on this show from our field, or not even our field, but someone who's an innovator that would be interesting to have as a guest?
Yeah, I don't know if you know Dr. Colleen Best. She's a resilience veteran. She does resilience. She's a PhD in veterinary epidemiology, but her research focused on mental health and resilience in the veterinary field. And she and I are teaming up to do a course this fall. And she's just has really good ideas and has a really good way of presenting them in a way that everybody is able to apply them, which I think is cool.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.